super fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Porchlight Letters podcast number 2547. We've got a cool topic today. Where was your family when they had their first date? Now, this could be first date together. So like grandparents, when did they have their first date? It could be talking with one of your relatives and asking their first date ever, especially if it wasn't with the person they ended up getting married to. You know, what happened? Where did they break up? Why did they break up? It could be anything of that. My very first date, first time I ever went on a date, I was 14, and the guy was 17, and it was a friend of my my best friend, my almost like a foster sister to me. It was a friend of hers. She went to school with this guy, and the three of us went on our first date. Well, the two of us went on our very first date, and Marie came along as a chaperone. And we went and saw For Your Eyes Only, the James Bond movie, For Your Eyes Only. It was 1981. It had just come out, and we went and saw For Your Eyes Only. It was the first time I'd ever seen a James Bond movie, and I was hooked. And yes, that one had Roger Moore playing James Bond, and Sean Connery will always be my James Bond, even though I saw Roger Moore in the role first. When I found out there was a whole slew of James Bond movies, I went back and watched them all. And was hooked. That was hooked. That was my very, very first date ever. Let's see, the first date with Brad. What did we do then? We met online in 1996. I flew over to the States. And where did we go on our first date? Oh, he took me out to dinner. We went to a nice, just a casual restaurant, and had a nice burger and fries. This was a burger and fries restaurant. Can't remember which restaurant did he take me to? I honestly don't remember. I know it's not the restaurant doesn't exist anymore. They closed down. Not just because we've been there. They closed down a few years after we've been there. But we had a lovely, lovely meal and a great conversation. Let's see. So a first date is often the beginning of a story that changes everything. So you have those first ever dates. Sometimes they are with the person that you are then with for the rest of your life. You meet in high school, you become high school sweethearts, and you end up getting married and having a families. And so, you meet in high school, and that's, they say the rest is history. So yes, you have those fun stories. Then you have the ones that dated for a bit before they found the right one. So, what were their first dates like? What was their first date ever? That's always a good question. What was their first date ever? So it may have seemed like an ordinary afternoon or evening at the time. Two people meet for a coffee, went to the pictures or the movies, depending on what you want to call it. We call them the pictures here in New Zealand. Shared a milkshake at a local diner, took a walk through a park, or simply spent time talking. Have you ever sat with somebody and just talked for hours on a first date and talked for hours and hours about anything and everything, and you didn't want to leave each other? Even though you may have had it, if you were a teenager, you may have had a curfew that you had to be home by, but you just sat and just talked and talked and talked and talked and talked, and soon enough it was time for you to go home. And of course, back in the 50s and before, back in the dating's a lot different now than it used to be, because you used to have times that you had to be home by when you're going on a date, and the date had to come into the house and meet, and especially if the boy was picking up the girl, the boy had to come into the house and meet the father and talk to them. And I remember meeting one guy one time. Oh my gosh. I kind of know what he did. I knew who he worked for, who had worked for. So I totally understood why he did what he did. But when his girls went out if they went out for the first time with a guy, he would invite them to the house. He would sit down and talk, and he would ask them for their driver's license. And he would hang on to their driver's license until they brought his daughter back home. He did this he had only had like 2 or 3 daughters, and he did this for his daughters. And he held on to that license until they brought his daughter back home. And they go, but what if I need it? He says, if you need it, you call me. I will come and bring your driver's license with me, and I will bring my daughter home, and that will be that. But fathers of daughters can be a little intimidating if they want to be. So there may be some very good, funny stories around that as well. So look out, keep an ear open for those. for those funny stories. And then, and so you have these conversations that just go on and on and on, but you have to stop the conversation so that you can get home in time and that sort of thing, because that would lead to a second date. Now you've got more other things to talk about. They had no way of knowing that one conversation, one smile, or one invitation could shape the rest of their lives. And even if you didn't carry on with that person, you ended up breaking up, there were things that you learned from that you grew. There were lessons learned that you grew from to become a better person for yourself, to know what you want, to what you don't want. So there were lessons that you learned as well, and that helped get you ready for the right one when they came along. Or you may have already hit the right one when they came along, and so that was that. I know people who got engaged after a week and married within a month. I've known people who were very close to each other and then got separated for years and then came back years later and ended up getting married again. Never forgetting about each other. They just lost, life happened and they ended up losing contact with each other. So there's all these stories in between, and then people who might date for like about 2 or 3 years before they get married, or even longer. They may live together for a few years first before they get married. There's all sorts of amazing love stories out there. You just have to open your ears and listen. I love a good love story. I love listening to how people met, how long between when they met. Some people met each other, didn't get a chance to go on a date, separated, went their own ways, came back and met up again later on, maybe a year or two later, and maybe have dated at that time, and something happened and they separated again, and then they came back again, and then that time they stuck. Heard those stories too. But every couple has a different story. Some met through friends or family, while others met at work, at church, at a dance, or by a complete chance. There were nervous moments, awkward silences, plenty of laughter, and perhaps a few butterflies. Long before dating apps and mobile phones, people found creative ways to get to know one another, and those stories are often full of warmth and humor. And the days before technology got involved with all the dating sites and that, people used to write letters. They used to sit down with pen and paper and write each other letters, especially if they lived in a different town or a city, or if they were away during the wartime and stuff. They would write letters backwards and forwards to each other. There's all sorts of things out there, and just these beautiful stories that come out that were written with pen and paper, and put through the post. None of this app stuff, none of this dating online thing, and just that sort of thing. Many of us exist because of that very first date that led to another date, and then a courtship, a wedding, children, grandchildren, and generations that followed. Looking back, it's remarkable to think how one simple decision to say yes changed the future for an entire family. These are the moments that bring family history to life. Names and dates tell us when people were born or married, but stories about first dates tell us who they were, what made them laugh, and how love found its way into their lives. These are my favorite stories to hear. I mean, I just love listening to hear people talk about some of the adventures that life has given them. But my most favorite ones to hear are the love stories. How did they get together? When did they meet? Where did they go for their first date? Did they even have a first date? Was there arranged marriage? Was it one that they just a per chance meeting? Where did they meet? How did they get on that first date? How long did it take for him to get her number? Because back in the day, it was, you don't go chasing the guy. He has to come chase you, kind of thing. You had to give your number to him, and he was the one that would call for the first date. Yes, there were the little rebels in there where they did it the other way around. The girl called up the guy for the date, but it was kind of frowned upon back in some of the days where it had to be the guy who had to make the first move. And if the days before telephones, there might have been letters going backwards and forwards. There could have been a knock at the door, and the father would have invited the young man in and sat down and talked with him before he was allowed to take his daughter out. He had to ask permission to court the daughter. So there's those sorts of stories as well that are out there. I tell you, there are so many different ways that people met, how they got together, how they fell in love. Was it love at first sight? Was it something that grew out of their friendship? These stories are absolutely incredible. And if we get the chance to tell them, then tell them. Tell those stories. Who made the first move? Who was the one that saw the eyes across the room and approached them and asked for their name? Maybe it was at a dance, going and getting on the dance card. If you don't know what a dance card is, go look it up. So what happened with it? So what was the love stories? Some will make you cry. Yes, some when you hear them make them cry, because like events seem to keep pulling them apart, but they kept coming back together and then get pulled apart again. They come back together, they get pulled apart again, and they come back together and stay together. There was life events that were constantly pulling them apart. But what made them stick? What made them know that that was the one for them? So your family tree challenge today is ask a couple in your family about their first date. Where did they go? Who asked whom? Who asked whom? What did they talk about? Was there a funny or unexpected moment? When did they realize this relationship might become something special? Record their story today, because every family tree begins with two people whose paths cross just at the right time. And let us know in the comments below some of the stories that you uncover. And with that, we are out of here. Go out, have a super fantastic sparkling evening. And we'll see you back here tomorrow evening around 7 p.m. because I have my mastermind call on, which usually goes past my normal time. So around 7 p.m. tomorrow evening. He konera.